You got the touch. You got the power. Yeah!
Hello and welcome to But I Digress, the vlog where sometimes my mouth goes faster than my brain. I am your host, Nathan, call me Nate Marchand. And this week I decided I would try another new kind of show. In this case, a top 5 list. Specifically, the top 5 movies you're not watching. I have to give a shout out to my friend and fellow writer Nick Hayden for giving me the idea for this show. Thanks, Nick. So, what do I mean by the top 5 movies you're not watching? Well, in this case, these are 5 movies that, in my humble opinion, I think are underrated and or underwatched. Now, I'm going to add one little caveat to this list. I'm only going to be talking about movies that I own, or in one case, my little brother Jared owns. But if I was going by movies that I've just seen in general, this list would be a little bit different. So, with all of that in mind, let's get started. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This is the story of a young quasi-slacker who meets the girl of his dreams, quite literally. But in order to get her, he must fight and defeat her 7 evil exes. This movie was based on a popular comic book, but it was a box office flop. In fact, it only played at my local theater for 2 weeks. And I really don't understand why. It's got all the right elements for a blockbuster movie. There's action, there's comedy, there's romance, a cast of fairly well-known actors, and even a fairly well-known director in Edgar Wright, who before this had directed Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. My guess is that since the movie is really quirky, there's a fair amount of nerd and geek references in it, not to the point that it becomes a giant reference joke, but a lot of them nonetheless, that people just weren't quite sure what to do with it when it first came out. Now, I have it at the bottom of my top 5 list because, I will admit, the movie's fairly well known, especially within fandom, and it did very well with critics. And thankfully, I think it is picking up in popularity now that it's hit Blu-ray and DVD, and that way it's finding its audience. And I have a feeling it's going to be a lot like The Princess Bride, where it's a movie that the studio and audiences don't quite know what to make of when it first comes out in theaters, but then it finds its audience and gets super popular after it's hit home entertainment. Clue! The movie! Here's a flick about a group of strangers who are summoned to a mansion out in the middle of nowhere by the mysterious Mr. Body, only to have their host end up dead. Now all the guests are wondering which one of them could have possibly killed him, and hijinks ensue. This, so far as I know, is one of only 2 movies ever made that are based on a board game, except this one actually doesn't suck. This is fairly low on my list because, again, in the right circles, it's a fairly well-known movie. It was a box office flop, but got very popular on home entertainment systems, particularly VHS and, believe it or not, Laserdiscs. As I read that back in the day, Laserdisc movies cost $80 to $100 a piece, but not this one. It was only $20, so lots of Laserdisc player owners have bought it. This is a very quirky movie with really eccentric characters reacting to some very absurd situations, which is why the cast in this is so great. It includes Tim Rocky Horror Picture Show Curry as the butler and Christopher Lloyd. Yes, Doc Brown is in this movie. And one of the most interesting things about it is that it has 3 endings. In fact, I heard that when this was released theatrically, different theaters with different prints of the movie would have different endings. So you have to go to 3 different theaters if you wanted to see all 3 endings, until it was released on home entertainment. When on VHS and on Laserdisc and DVD, you could watch all 3 of them. But the coolest thing about the DVD, though, is that when you play it, when it starts, it gives you the option of either having one of the endings played randomly, or you can watch all 3, so you can see how it could have turned out. Titan AE. Here's an animated sci-fi flick set 1,000 years in the future where the Earth has been destroyed by vicious aliens. And now a young man named Kale has discovered that he has a genetically encoded map on the palm of his hand that leads to the spaceship called the Titan, which holds the secret to the salvation of mankind. The first thing you'll notice about this movie is that it has an all-star voice cast featuring the likes of Matt Damon, Nathan Lane, Drew Barrymore, John Leguizamo, and it was co-directed by Don Bluth, who's best known for movies like The Secret of Nim, An American Tail, and The Land Before Time. And it also has a script co-written by everyone's favorite Hollywood nerd, Joss Whedon. This has great animation, utilizing both 2D and 3D animation, since this was made in 2000. It has a combination of both because people were kind of transitioning from 2D to 3D at the time. It also has a very creative science fiction universe filled with lots of many interesting aliens who interact with the humans throughout it. And it has a very witty script. But what do you expect from anything that has Joss Whedon's name on it? So you would think with all of that going for it, why was it a box office flop? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I would venture to guess part of it might have been the confusing title. It's Titan AE. Titan is the name of the ship that they're looking for, and AE stands for After Earth. I think it's a new calendar system that's being utilized in the movie. And also, people might have looked at this and thought that it looked a little too much like Star Wars, but I can tell you right now, any resemblance to Star Wars that this movie has is really superficial, so I would highly recommend you go out and watch it. Trust me, you won't regret it. 9. As I said at the beginning of this video, one of the movies on this list I actually don't own. It belongs to my little brother Jared, and that's what this is. So, in order to talk about it, I'm going to have Jared on here with me. Come on, Jared. Okay. This is an animated fantasy film about 9 doll-like creatures in a post-apocalyptic world who set about on a quest to restore the world to what it once was. It's not the most interesting of plot synopses, I understand, but it's the best I'm coming up with right now. So, Jared, tell us a little bit about this movie.
Well, for starters, this movie was based on a short film, which began several years ago for production, where Shane Acker, the creator of the movie and the short film that it was based on, started actually working on animation for The Lord of the Rings Return of the King. After that was completed, he went to make it of 9 as a student film with friends of his. Then once that was done, it was actually in for the 2005 Academy Awards, which it was nominated for Best Animated Short Film, but didn't win. But it managed to attract the attention of 2 of its producers, Tim Burton and Tim Beckentomoff.
Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, I know,
It's so
it
weird.
sounds hard.
I'm looking at it, I still can't figure out how to say it. But it's the guy who directed Wanted and most recently Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter?
Yes.
Okay.
And together, they both decided to help produce the movie and to help support it. And now here it is, on DVD, and once it was in theaters.
Yeah, it's a staggeringly original vision. I have not seen anything like this. With such clever creature and character designs and a world just so unlike anything I have ever seen. It's astonishing. I mean, you got these little dolls right here that honestly look kind of like, maybe you can see a little bit if I hold it up. They look like the forerunners to Sackboy from the Little Big Planet video games, except they're wearing goggles and they go around fighting monsters and robots using common household things like light bulbs and needles, and just, it's so chock full of creativity. And it has several well-known actors in it too, doing the voices. You got Elijah Wood, John C. Reilly, and Jennifer Connelly.
Clover Gloveland and Christopher Plummer.
Yeah, Christopher Plummer's in it too?
Yes.
Oh, didn't know that. So, I'm just surprised that nobody went to go see this, but I guess it was so strange and new that people didn't know what to do with it.
Or it could have been that it might have never been advertised that well. Because, sometimes it's hard to get movies out between certain people, and, it's just how hard it can be just to get it out.
Yeah. But now it's on DVD and probably on Netflix, so I highly recommend you go and you find this. You will really like it, I'm sure. It's a tie! Gojira and Gamera 3, The Revenge of Iris. Gojira is the original Japanese version of the 1956 film Godzilla King of the Monsters, and tells the story of a dinosaur that is revived and mutated by nuclear tests and goes on a rampage in the heart of Tokyo, Japan. Gamera 3, The Revenge of Iris, tells the story of a vengeful Japanese schoolgirl whose family was killed by accidentally killed by the heroic turtle monster Gamera, and now she has discovered a creature that shares her hatred of Gamera, and then she raises it into a monstrosity, and then both of them set about to avenge themselves against Gamera. I selected both of these movies as the number one spot on my list today because they're the same genre. They are giant monster movies. And people have this notion that giant monster movies are all corny. Neither of these are corny. They take themselves very seriously and meditate on two very deep and meaningful themes. Gojira is a meditation on the nuclear age, using, yes, a giant fire-breathing dinosaur as a metaphor for the atomic bomb. This was made in 1954, less than a decade after the bombings of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And you have to remember, Japan, to this day, remains the only country to ever have nuclear bombs dropped on it. The imagery in this is stark. It is startling. And it is a poetic representation of the dangers of using nuclear weapons. Gamera 3 is the climax to an epic trilogy of Gamera films made in the mid to late 90s. This one is a story of revenge and how corrupting and how consuming it is and the dangers of it. And really, it turns the characters in this into monsters in so many ways because of their obsession with revenge. Both of these movies really deserve to be viewed and not to be seen as just pieces of cornball entertainment, because neither of them are that. They have excellent characters and have astonishing special effects, particularly Gamera 3. Normally when I watch giant monster movies, I've trained myself to suspend my disbelief, because, yes, these are really just guys in big rubber suits on sound stages destroying model buildings. But the effects in Gamera 3 are so good that I didn't have to do that. I just got sucked in and to what I was seeing, and I didn't have to suspend my disbelief. I bought everything. It is astonishing what this film was able to do. Now I understand why so many people within fandom were going crazy about it. So I highly recommend you find both of these movies and you watch them, because they will astonish you with their quality. Well, there you have it, true believers. The top 5 movies you're not watching. As with any sort of list like this, it is purely my opinion. I'm sure you have your own ideas about what the top 5 movies that people aren't watching are. And you know what? I want to know. I want you to tell me what are the movies that you think people aren't watching and deserve to be watched. So leave me some comments here on YouTube and on my website, and we can have a chat about it. I'd love to get new recommendations for movies that I haven't seen, particularly ones that I may not know about and should go track down. So please let me know. Thank you for joining me this week on But I Digress. This is Nate Marchand, signing off. Smoke it, do it,